welcome to another episode of Turn 7. I'm the WahooWarrior. Going to be talking today about the new FAQ that just came out the other day. There's been a lot of talk on the forums, the different Facebook pages and whatnot, and I was just going to go through some of the changes. I know that there's a lot of people out there, they look at bolt action, the FAQs, and the desire for rule changes. One of the things I do like about the bolt action community is most of the people out there are looking for answers for fairness. They'd like to see parity between the different armies, and they're not looking for edges in particular. They're just trying to make sure they got it right. And I really like that about the community. Just wanted to say that right off the bat. So the first FAQ, there's the errata and then the FAQ, and in the errata section, the first thing they mention, new changes, is about snipers. So the first errata they talk about is snipers. It's not really a change, more of a clarification that on advance order, all members of the team can fire any weapon they are carrying. In the assault, they can use the assault rule from their pistol or submachine guns. Now this is just snipers, not all teams, not bazookas and Piats and things. So it just clarifies it. I know in the Beasts of War demo, which was very popular, I think they discussed that they can fire their weapons normally. Say you have 2 rifles, they can fire on an advance. The next is cavalry. And this is one that, although I've never really played against cavalry, a lot of people who do, and in multiple discussions was always, the way it had become through various rules lawyers and whatnot is that cavalry could assault buildings since they're not actually entering a building. Here the errata clarifies that cavalry cannot assault a building unless they dismount first, which always made complete sense to me, but the contention was that they're not actually going in the building. They're just assaulting it, but then why would they get their extra attacks, is what I would say. But so it does clarify it. They're not allowed to have to assault buildings, and they cannot board transport vehicles, which makes me wonder, what tournament did somebody load up a couple units of cavalry into transport vehicles and have them run out and assault people. It must have happened. But so that is clarified as of now. It also clarifies that against infantry or artillery, they get 3 attacks per model, regardless of their weaponry. So no double stacking. If they have submachine guns, they get 3 plus another one. I think the Polish Lancers still get an additional attack under their rule, against a vehicle, they only make a single attack. There's also some more stuff in the FAQ that takes some Panzerschrecks and whatnots and talks about the Panzerfaust, and we'll get to that. But so that's that for the cavalry. Next item they touch on is motorbikes. Right after that, similar to cavalry, they cannot assault buildings unless they're dismounted first, and they can't board transport vehicles. So again, begs the question, who was doing that? But must have been in some game club, must have been interpreted that way. So they've clarified that. The next one they addressed is assaulted transports. I'm glad they did clarify this. I think most people have kind of played it correctly as much as they could, but the default, and myself and their local game club, was that if I have the transport and I have 3 units in it, like say a Buffalo, or even a half track with 2 small units, or a half track with a 6-man squad, a lieutenant and a medic, is if somebody assaults my half track, everybody had to get out, but it didn't really clarify who picks what. The default was that you could see it either way. The attacker gets to choose, or I get to feed him a unit. If I got to feed him a unit, I could feed him the medic and then assault him on my turn with my unit. So I'm glad they did clarify the order for that. Just makes it a lot simpler. Keeps anybody from setting up little assault traps where you could just give up a medic and then wipe out his unit when he clearly had the advantage attacking your transport in the first place. So that's good. The next thing that they go into is basically, that's it for the errata for the general rules, and they start talking about some of the particular army rules. First army they look to have is armies of Germany. And the first thing they say is light mortar team. This mortar cannot fire smoke. I'm Not really sure why they included that. I didn't think there was a big issue on light mortar, but it must not have traditionally been able to fire that, so they added that. They give the Panzer V and the Tiger the ability to take a pintle-mounted medium machine gun, so plus 15 points. Next thing is they say page 86 and 92. Well, actually, the next thing is more important. It's note that both these selectors, grenadiers, are not allowed to have assault rifles. So that's in reference to here infantry squads changed to here grenadier squads, and here veteran infantry changed to here veteran grenadier. At first look, you think, whoa, no assault rifles other than Waffen, but the reality of that rule is that when you look through the armies list, the armies of Germany, they're basically just restricting assault rifles to pre-1944, end of 1943, because in the selector, army selectors list for different things, it says, you know, here infantry. So under that generic change to the reference, people could take a infantry or an army selector from a blitzkrieg type time set and say, well, my guys are now grenadiers, so they can take the assault rifles. So in the actual theater selector list, there's ones in the 44 and up that specifically say here grenadier unit. So whenever you have substituted here infantry with here grenadier, those guys aren't allowed to take assault rifles, but here grenadiers are. So it just clarifies that and keeps the assault rifles out of the early war time frame, early to mid-war. So, and then next is page 86 and 92. It just clarifies the defenses because it never really said what they were, so it specifies them. Particular theater selector, and then the Armies of the United States, U.S. Marine Squad points adjustment. I think it's just a clarification. It might have been a typo. I'm not for sure on that. M5 Stuart tank can take a medium machine gun for plus 15 points or a heavy machine gun upgrade. There's and then the LVT-4 Water Buffalo may upgrade both pintle mounts to a heavy machine gun and add an additional forward hull mount for 10. I love the Buffalo. I use it for my British, and in the future I'm planning to use Marines. And then that actually, when I read that rule, I looked in the British section and I realized they already had it. The British can take the heavy machine gun upgrade and the hull mount because it wasn't in green, but it must have already been there. I didn't even know that, so that was good for me to know. The British one is awesome. It holds less guys, but it can put a light autocannon on it too, so it basically becomes a early war machine gun autocannon tank. Armies of Japan, the Tankette got a little weapon upgrade, and then basically the Armies of Great Britain. It defines the paratroopers stubborn rule. Clarifies that if forced to check the morale, then they always test on their full morale value, ignoring any pin markers. I thought basically what it said before was like a half casualty, so it gives them a little bit. So if they take the flamethrower one, where they take the pins and are checked to be destroyed, they're forced there. So it's basically the same plus that. Maybe another instance where that came into play, but it's just a little bit of a clarification. Under the British, they make the Churchill be able to replace their 6-pounder with a 95mm medium howitzer at no point cost, and then the Mark IV for less 10 points. So you can put the medium howitzer on the Churchill. And then there's just a Fall of Singapore selector where they change the transport and tow section. No changes under the Army of Soviet Union. France and the Allies, a Renault FT can upgrade to the low velocity tank gun. There's cars and light trucks can add a light anti-tank gun rear mount for 50 points. And then you go to Armies of Italy and Axis. They take off some Panzerfaust from an infantry section. Well, the tank hunter rule, because they then clarify that. They can have Panzerfaust, but they take off the tank hunters rule, because they do clarify that in a little bit. Flak gun can have gun shield. Same with another entry on the tank hunters. Then late war cavalry take off the tank hunters, so they're just clarifying that tank hunters. And then you get to the actual frequently asked questions. The first one is that's a new change is a roll of a 1 auto miss, and it does not automatically miss, but rolls of 1 to damage do automatically fail to damage. And that's pretty much what was in the rules as written. So not a huge change. I think a lot of clubs just said 1's always miss, but it really only comes into play for a sniper, I think. Next is, do officer models killed by an exceptional damage roll, do their other men stay? And this one, they say yes, they stay, and they suffer a -1 morale for losing like a squad leader. And that's something new. I think, you know, it only applies to HQs, so you can still snipe off the medium machine gun guy or a bazooka team member, but if you kill the lieutenant or whatnot, then their other guys stay. A medic is a HQ unit, a forward observer is a HQ unit, so if you take the extra guys and they pick off your actual observer or medic, the other guy can still be an order dice in the bag. I thought that was interesting. So combine that with some of the changes with cavalry, you might actually have some interesting little side units floating around that you're not able to take off that order dice. I'll get to that when I get to that section, but you know, there's some lists like the British commando list. You can take a 5-man team. I mean, that's where it makes sense. You know, you kill that lieutenant or whatnot, and the other 5 guys don't die. But on the smaller ones, you may have one guy, a rifleman, with the order dice hiding out somewhere trying to capture an objective. So that doesn't go away. Next one is they just ask about if they're playing a scenario, allocating half of your units or whatnot. Do the spotters count? And they say no. If a unit assaults an enemy recce vehicle from within 6, can the recce vehicle escape? I know Alicio had commented on a forum and clarified this, but he actually put it in the FAQ, and they can still escape. So you can't get to within 6 of a recce and assault it, and it doesn't get to react. It still gets to recce. Next is, if a unit uses a bonsai rule or the up and atom to make an assault an enemy but fails to make contact, does it lose all of its pin markers anyway? And the answer is no, but it does lose a single pin marker as it has passed a test, as if it has passed a test to run. Only if it makes contact, then it loses all of its pin markers. So that's where you see some of the Japanese bonsai players issuing those run orders and just shedding a pin all the way across. But yeah, they don't lose them all. The next they talk about how to determine a vehicle in cover, and I like that they address this because, you know, it's kind of difficult sometimes trying to figure out what they're trying to ask for, especially if people, who many do, come from other game systems, and they're looking at you know, the front arc or side arc of the armor, and so there's been a lot of questions. So they do address this. So the rule, as I write it now, let's go ahead and read this. It says, how do you determine whether a vehicle is in cover or not? Is it how much a firing unit can see of the entire vehicle, regardless of which vehicle arc, front, side, or rear they are firing at or from, or how much of the specific side of the vehicle they can see from the vehicle arc they are firing at it from. In other words, if my firing unit is standing directly in front of a vehicle and 50% of the vehicle's front is concealed, but I can also see all of its right-hand side, does the vehicle get cover modifier or not? And it says it's actually the entire vehicle, not the facing you're firing at. So the majority of the vehicle, or over 50%, is in cover, then the vehicle is in cover, and vice versa. In your example, the vehicle would not get cover. So in this one, you know, I've had the same question. Like in this picture here, depending on how long this half-track vehicle type thing is, you know, I'm firing into this vehicle's front arc, so I use this front armor. But if more than half the model, let's say it's a couple more inches over to the left, where I can just see the front tire, but the entire front arc, so the vehicle would actually be in cover. I guess they account for the vehicles moving as you're firing and the action of combat. So that will clarify that a little bit for people. Sometimes they have, I have a particular problem with that sometimes when I'm trying to figure out whatnot. So the next thing we go to, that's a question about Panzerfaust, and they determine that each one can be fired at a different enemy vehicle, and there's no obligation to fire them all. And it asked pinning values, are they instead of, or are they like D6 plus 1, or are they D6, and it says they're instead of, so that's, you know, D2, D3, D6. It's not D2, D3, D6 plus 1. I think everyone played that way, but they do clarify that. The next question is one that I actually wrote to Warlord Games, so it's, you know, my question, and it kind of piggybacked off that video I made about one hit, one pin. But it does do the multiple pins on an armored vehicle. You know, I don't really agree with that, just for game balance sake, but that's what they have determined. And I'm very happy they addressed the question and put it into the FAQ. And I'm glad I wrote them. Now that they responded, I kind of wish I would have wrote them about another item or two, but that's all right. So if your heavy tank gets hit by a heavy howitzer, you're going to be taking the D6 pins as long as it can penetrate you, and they do clarify that, you know, as long as it can penetrate you. Veteran vehicles don't take pins if it doesn't penetrate, and regulars take on a 50-50 chance. And they talk about some other partisan units being, can they take it if it's not available as an experience? It can't. It says, can you regroup into a building or obstacle after an assault? That's a good question. I've had that come up in a game, because you have to actually run to get into a building, and they say no, you cannot. So that answers that question. You can't reconsolidate into a building or a vehicle, so you can't get back into your transport if you had to jump out and defend it. But you can take the obstacle that you killed the unit. So if they're in a building, you can then occupy that building under the building rules. Can AA guns fire all around? They can if they're on a turntable. And what's interesting about their ruling is they didn't specify against aircraft. I kind of thought they might. So you can spin that thing 360 and fire at infantry all you want, according to the rule. Then they talk about recce, can they escape an ambush? And they can. So recce is still as powerful as it ever was. Does a unit armed with one or more Panzerfaust gain the benefit tank hunter rule? And so basically the ruling is they are not tank hunter rule, so they don't get the full wounding chart. So they still take the glancing blow, but they don't take the tank fear check. So you got a unit with a Panzerfaust in it. A lot of German players buy at least one to give their unit what they thought was tank hunter rule. So now they can assault a vehicle, like if they had anti-tank grenades for cheaper, but you don't roll the full damage. So you do a glance. The most you could do is glance it. That's all right with me. I played German as one of my armies, and I take the 5-point Panzerfaust. I usually take 2 anyway, but yeah, that doesn't really bother me. It just clarifies, and that's where I was talking about all those access rules. It clarifies those, the tank hunter part, so it does the same thing here. Unit set up as observers, snipers. Does their transport have to be near them? No. Can you charge from inside a building into another? Yes. Can infantry change direction as many times they want? I don't know why that applies, but I'm sure there's a reason. They say yes. When firing a flamethrower team at open top armored transport, such as a German Hanomag, how are the hits against the troops inside resolved? That's a decent question. So the Hanomag would take the since it's open top, D3 plus 1 pins, and the rule is that everybody inside takes the same amount as the vehicle, so they take those. It's a heavy weapon, so there's no reason not to. Only the vehicle, though, would have to take the test to be destroyed. Everybody else would not. So if the vehicle is destroyed, they take the normal bailing out rules, extra hits, and go down, but they don't have to test to be destroyed. I kind of wish that they would have addressed flamethrowers in that I think that man-pack flamethrowers should be a fixed team. So you can't do the Jeep run, hop out, and torch a unit on 2 order dice. It would make you get out. I mean, they were kind of burdensome, cumbersome things to use. If you had all day, you could really light up defensive unit positions and pillboxes and buildings, but they weren't all that safe to use for the people using them. So I wish they would have made that a fixed team, but they didn't even address it, and that's one of the questions I wish I would have asked. Then they ask, can you use a penetration value of a stern pistol in close combat? And they say no, you don't use any penetration values. And then the FAQs on some of the Army book stuff. It's Germany. The 88mm gun has versatile. If it fires as a howitzer, what's its range? And they answer it 42 because it's fired as a howitzer. Does a Tiger tank have the same gun? No. Which vehicle is allowed to tow a Nebelwerfer? Treat them as light howitzer. Can a Nebelwerfer or other multiple rocket launcher be manhandled? They say yes. File the normal units for artillery. Armies of the United States, they ask about the scout car with transport and tow section. They basically ruled the M3 scout car should be in transport and tow section. If M3 is upgraded to recce status, it counts as a platoon's recce vehicle. I don't know what that means. It counts as the platoon's recce vehicle. There's no restriction on how many recces you can take. So M18, they ask if they can make it faster. They say no, just because they don't account that specifically into the gear. Which theater selector can engineer squads be taken as veterans? There's no actual ruling on that. Then they just give you a guideline. Rules, ask about rules for armored jeeps. There are no rules for that. It's just a cool model. And then the armies of the Soviet Union. Oh, then there's some more into that about the, let's see, British light howitzer. Do all light howitzers have it, or just 25 pounder? It says they all do. As far as the cannon fire as a light anti-tank gun. They ask about the Tulip Sherman rocket launchers. They're allowed in 1945 into the Reich. So they add this rule. They allow them into the 1945 into the Reich. And it talks about the rules for that. Basically 25 points per rocket. Can add them. Counts the mounted heavy howitzer with the following rules: inaccurate, one-shot rocket, complex, may either fire the rocket or the main gun. Armies of the Soviet Union. On what role are my Soviet troops damaged if they have body armor on them and their transport is destroyed? The -1 modifier does not apply to hits from a destroyed transport. Does body armor stack with extra protection special rule? They had already ruled on this before, but now they added a green. On page 56, it's possible to use other tanks via Lend-Lease. Oh, never mind. They already ruled on it. So then the next question is Lend-Lease tanks. They say they suggest using the most common, not the variants. Then a Siege of Sevastopol selector. No Soviet forces, except for see above, can be taken as veteran. On the Soviet weapons sprue, there's automatic rifles, but there's no automatic rifles in the rule book. You know, they want to know if they can take that, you know, so they can have that thing. And the Soviets already have like the most wide range of equipment. Their heavy stuff is way underpriced. They have cavalry, they have extra unit, they have extra anti-tank stuff, lots of small units, and then it looks like there's a Soviet player out there with like the British or the American move and fire rule for the having M1 Garands for the Tokarov. So then they say no, but then they kind of say between your friends you can, and that just, you go into that rule, because it's the reason why the Americans have that is just their American Army rule, not because of a particular rifle. Otherwise you could just open up a giant can of worms, because the MG42 machine gun for the Germans fired, I forget now, crazy, like in the thousands of rounds, 1,000 rounds per minute or something. So big deal. Semi-automatic rifle fires a little bit faster than a bolt action, but so does the MG42. So you just open up a can of worms. So it's just, a rifle is a rifle. And speaking of that, I really wish that they would make rifles more powerful in this game to have more people take them. And I'd love to see rifles be a 36-inch range similar to the sniper rifle if they're not moving and firing. You wouldn't have the sniper scope. You would just have a 36-inch range if you're standing fast, and that would be awesome, because then you would see a lot more people taking rifle teams, and that would balance quite a bit. Boy, I'd love to see that. I never wrote that in. I wish I would have. That's another thing I never wrote. I wish I would have. Next, they talk about armies of Japan, and they ask about NCOs and whatnot. If they have model the swords, do they get the tough fighter rule and only officers do? Somebody asked, the suicide anti-tank team moves around the map in stealth in less than 12 inches of the enemy. No, because once you move, you're no longer hidden. And that's about that. I missed something here. There it is. If my platoon includes cavalry squads, can I mount an officer and the men in his team on horses? And they say that sounds reasonable. In a platoon that includes one or more cavalry squads, any headquarters team can be mounted on horses at the cost of +5 points per man getting the cavalry special rule. That's really interesting. I mean, I see why they do that. So if you can take a platoon of horses, you could then put all your headquarters units on horses. So you could have a medic with an extra guy, and now that they've said that once the medic dies, that the headquarters unit's not destroyed, just the particular guy is destroyed. So his special ability, like lieutenant or medic, would be gone. But if you took a 3-man medic squad, put them on horses, that would be a pretty decent unit, just running around all over the place, doing who knows what, or another type of headquarters unit. And it gives your medic the ability to move 18 inches, run to, and with a 6-inch bubble of his effective use, get him all over the map, doing his medic abilities. And then if he gets killed, then your buddy or 2 buddies that are with him could then, if they're armed with particular armament or whatnot, they can run around and kill things in turn 4, 5, and 6 and capture objectives and whatnot. So that's pretty interesting. I think you'll see some people with some pretty crazy stuff on that one. Not a game breaker, but boy, that could sure be annoying when you can't take off a couple order dice because the medic is his extra guy is now on a horse and you'll never catch him and kill him. So there's that, and that's pretty much all of the rules. If I interpreted any of them wrong, let me know. If I would love to comment and talk to you about them. Your questions or comments down the bottom, or opposing views, and we'll talk about it. I look forward to trying out some of this stuff and getting into my gameplay. I might have to come up with some crazy army lists, see if I can take advantage of some of this stuff. I'm a little bummed that Recce wasn't really addressed. I'm looking forward to a Season 2 type of army book, so hopefully they'll address it there. Thanks for watching.